Welcome back, Sawdusters. Let's finish the rolling wine bar. If you didn't watch part 1, you might want to click on it here. I'll be picking up where that video left off. With the carcass done, I can turn my attention to the face frame, cutting pieces to length at the table saw before drilling out pocket holes and assembling the entire face frame with pocket screws and glue before attaching it to the carcass using nothing more than glue and clamps. A whole lot of clamps. You may remember in part 1 that I made a lot of 1/4 inch thick trim by resawing lumber before adding a bevel to about half the pieces. To cut all these to length, I finally decided to set up the miter saw, so all I need to do is cut them and glue them in place. Could speed up the process by using brad nails, but I'm okay with taking the time to let the glue dry on each piece if it means I don't have to go back and fill nail holes. Oh man, was that naive. I thought I could just put glue on the trim, stick it in place, not like gravity or the bow in the wood is gonna pop it right back off. I didn't use nails, but I kinda wish I had, because I used 4 to 8 clamps on each stick of trim and left those in place for a full 24 hours while the glue dried, especially in the corners where the 2 bevels came together. But now that the trim's done, we can put the wheels on the bottom, and I think you'll agree, it's really starting to take shape. So now let's get to work on the drawers. I'm using the rest of the 1/2 inch plywood to get the sides of the drawers, ripping it down to 5-inch strips here at the table saw. And even though it's only 4 drawers, it still takes a lot of pieces of wood, and it's times like this where you want to make sure your mind doesn't wander and stays focused on the cut at hand. Now we can add dados to the bottom to hold 1/4 inch plywood, and I'll do this in 2 passes, nudging the fence over in between to get a snug, perfect fit. With the dados done, I can turn my attention to cutting some rabbets, which is how I'm going to join 2 sides together in the corners. Using my tenon jig to hold the sides vertically, making the first cut, before following up with the mini crosscut sled, making the second cut, which creates the rabbet. Now I can cut the plywood for the bottoms down to size. Originally, this was going to be out of 1/2 inch plywood, but after using so much on the cabinet, making the vertical walls thicker, I didn't have enough for the bottoms anymore. So I had to scrounge around in my shop, find some 1/4 inch plywood, and it turned out okay. Last thing to do before glue up is to run the sides through the router, putting just a little bit of a round over on the top edges. Once again, I am not using nails, just glue, clamps, and time to assemble these drawers. A lot of time. Next up, I can turn my attention to the drawer fronts, and I've got the last of the 3/4 inch plywood set aside for this purpose. But when I started cutting it down, I found out that the glue joint right down the middle had failed. So I had to fix this issue before I could even get started. But while it was sitting in clamps, I could go over to the table saw and start ripping some 1/8 inch thick strips that I'm going to use as edge banding. At this point, I've got almost no maple left. So I actually went to the burn pile to pull these little sticks out. Now solid wood is almost always thicker than plywood, so I also needed to rip down these thin strips to the correct width. By now, the glue on that 3/4 inch plywood should have set up, so we can rip it to final width at the table saw, as well as cross cut it to final length. A single bead of glue and some time in the clamps, and I think you'll agree those 1/8 inch strips look a lot better than having plies exposed on the edge of the drawer fronts. I want to add some detail to the drawer fronts, so I'm resawing the last of the maple before planing it down to 1/4 inch thick and ripping it down to 1.25 inches at the table saw. I can also cross cut it there and glue it and stick it into place. I got a bit of a good news, bad news situation for you. Good news, I am loving the way these drawer fronts have come out. Bad news, I've run out of time again. It has been 4 weeks since I posted my last video, and I don't want to go more than a month between videos. So I need to stop this project here. But in 2 weeks, not 4, 2 weeks, I'm going to make a video all about installing drawer slides and drawer fronts. I've heard from a lot of people over the years that this is a daunting task, so I'm going to walk you step by step through my process. So I hope you have a great week. Come back here in 2 weeks. And as always, get out there and make some sawdust.